know you're not getting out of here till at least 1:30, right? Just letting you know. We've got shofar service, and I got some important things to share with you today. So you're going to indulge me, because I got something to say. When I was 19 years old, I attended a protest against American involvement in the first Gulf War against Iraq. I was shocked to find my fellow protesters with posters containing vitriolic statements against Israel. My naive younger self did not understand why, in a war between America and Iraq, Israel was being vilified or had anything to do with it. I knew nothing about Israel at the time, other than that it was in the Middle East and was the Jewish state, but I didn't even know what that meant. So I went to my grandfather, who was a Jewish book publisher, and to my friends who were what I called super Jews, and I asked them to tell me about Israel and about Zionism. And so I listened and I read. I questioned and I learned. It was at this time that I realized how the perceptions of Israel in the diaspora affected me. How the perceptions of Israel in the diaspora affected me. A year later, I went to Israel for the first time on a 6-week program called A Taste of Israel with other university students. It was there that I fell in love with the energy of the people, the delicious food in the shuk, the magnificence of the Arava, the En Gedi waterfalls, the silky water of the Kinneret, the Sea of Galilee, the strange-looking animals at the Maktesh Ramon, the huge crater in the Negev, and yes, I fell in love with the chaos that is Israel. I must admit that it helped that the entire country functioned on my sense of time. Everyone and everything felt so alive. As I walked on the land, through ancient tunnels and archaeological remains, wading through centuries of history, everything felt relevant and alive. At the time, I did not know Hebrew, but the word swam over me like a WhatsApp chat meeting the Rosetta Stone, where modernity and antiquity, the present and the past, intersected. This was the timeless home of my people, and it was beautiful. Insane, loud, messy, chaotic, and beautiful. Fast forward 10 years, when I was fortunate enough to travel around the world with my husband for 9 months, exploring different terrains, meeting different people, being exposed to different cultures, languages, architecture, and animals. We also visited synagogues and Jewish communities wherever we went. One day, when I was reading a newspaper on a bus in Mexico, I was horrified to learn that 3 Israeli soldiers were captured and held in a Palestinian jail, where a mob of angry Palestinians stormed the jail and literally ripped the soldiers apart limb by limb. I couldn't believe it. The Israeli government at the time bombed the jail in retaliation. A random person sitting behind me on the bus asked why I gasped and wondered if everything was okay. I showed him the article. He said, I see what you mean. I can't believe that Israel bombed them. And that was it. Nothing else. Complete oversight of the barbarism of the mob that dismembered the Israeli soldiers. Clearly, Israeli lives didn't matter. Their worth was less than others. It was clear to me then that no matter how many times Israel showed restraint, no matter how many times Israel provided humanitarian aid, shared technological advancement, medical research, was internationally recognized for literature, music, and science, regardless of more left-wing or more right-wing governments, Israel would never be judged on an equal playing field as other countries. It was at that moment that I became a Zionist. It's not that I didn't support Israel before, but at that moment, my Zionism became about supporting Israel's right to exist no matter what, to show my love for Israel no matter what. Because if I couldn't do that, and the Jewish people everywhere couldn't do that, who would? My Zionism became about fighting for a Jewish homeland that made us proud, that reflected our values, that reflected me. And I sought to reflect Israel in my choices and actions, for I realized that Israel's fate is my fate. Perceptions of Israel are perceptions of me. In March this year, I was asked to speak at what was then a small group of mostly Israelis at Caulfield Park to a group called Unacceptable Australia, Saving Israeli Democracy. I learned that this group was part of a grassroots initiative by Israelis now living in over 50 countries around the world in solidarity with Israelis in Israel to convey our wider Jewish communal outrage at the proposed judicial reforms by the current Israeli government, threatening our core Jewish and democratic values upon which our homeland was built. According to Canadian-born Israeli journalist Maddie Friedman, the issue of the judicial reforms is actually not the core issue, but rather has become the symbol of a much deeper and a much more complex issue, that which threatens our Jewish homeland in a way that has not happened since the formation of the state. What makes this issue so different and in urgent need of diaspora Jewish support is the fact that if the proposed judicial reforms go through, according to Friedman, there may not be another free election in Israel to influence government policies. In the words of British historian and politician Lord John Acton, power tends to corrupt, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. In our Jewish tradition, the king, the person with the most power in the land, was restricted by his ownership of horses, wealth, wives, and positional power, in that he was not permitted to be a judge or a priest. In other words, originating in the Torah and developed throughout halakha, Jewish law, Judaism demands a system of checks and balances. The executive power, i.e. the monarch, could not be a judge, nor exact unfair taxes from the people, nor amass too much military power. Instead, the book of Deuteronomy dictates that the king of Israel must write his own Torah and obey its laws and learn from the priests. If he follows these laws, he will reign for many years. In the words of Rabbi David Ariel Joel, the senior rabbi at the temple in Louisville, Kentucky, basically, he says, the king is not in control. The laws of the Torah control the king. The Torah teaches us that in order to stay in power, it's necessary to restrict one's power. Anyone who abuses power will lose it. Rabbi Ariel Joel points out the paradox of power. Power is maintained only when it is restricted. Power is lost when it is abused. According to journalist Maddie Friedman, currently there is a huge divide in Israel with two main camps. The first camp is represented by the current government, led by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, and a cabinet comprised of national religious, right-wing nationalists, and the ultra-Orthodox Jews who collectively are pushing for increased settlements in the West Bank, draft exemptions, and welfare payouts so that the ultra-Orthodox can study full-time in yeshivot, as well as the weakening of liberal democratic values that support minority rights. The government also includes Likudniks, Sephardi and Mizrahi Jews who continue to harbor resentment towards Ashkenazi Zionist establishment for treating them like second-class citizens during Israel's earlier decades. Additionally, they have been subjected to harsh anti-Semitism and expelled from Muslim lands and Arab lands, and do not believe that Arab Israelis deserve the same rights as the Jewish Israelis in a Jewish state. Rabbi Daniel Hartman, the president of the Shalom Institute in Jerusalem, who recently came on a speaking tour to Australia, shared with us that Avi Maoz, who's a member of the Knesset, the Israeli parliament, from the far-right Noam party, is currently in charge of education. He said that the greatest threat to Israel is women and gays. He has been given a huge budget to rewrite the textbooks for the Israeli secular school system. The agenda of this current government is clear. Reduce the power of the courts to increase the power of the government, to create an Orthodox, religious observant Jewish state limiting the rights of women, Arabs, the LGBTQI+ community, and non-Orthodox Jews, while expanding Jewish settlements in what they believe to be Greater Israel. The second camp is what is now known as the protest movement, for whom the Israeli Declaration of Independence has become their symbol. They claim that the current Israeli government is making changes that threaten the core values upon which the state of Israel was established, being both a democratic and a Jewish state. I really tried to edit as much as I could, but it is so beautiful, so you're going to have to indulge me. The declaration states, Eretz Yisrael, the land of Israel, was the birthplace of the Jewish people. Here there was spiritual, religious, and political identity was shaped. After being forcibly exiled from their land, the people remained faithful to it throughout their dispersion and never ceased to pray and hope for their ultimate return to it and for the restoration of it in their political freedom. The state of Israel will be based on freedom, justice, and peace, as envisioned by the prophet of Israel. It will ensure complete equality of social and political rights to all of its inhabitants, irrespective of religion, race, or sex. It will guarantee freedom of religion, conscience, language, education, and culture. It will safeguard the holy places of all religions, and it will be faithful to the principles of the Charter of the United Nations. We appeal, in the very midst of the onslaught launched against us now for months, to the Arab inhabitants of the State of Israel to preserve peace and participate in the upbuilding of the state on the basis of full and equal citizenship and due representation in all of its provisional and permanent institutions. We extend our hand to all neighboring states and their peoples in an offer of peace and good neighborliness, and appeal to them to establish the bonds of cooperation and mutual help with the sovereign Jewish people settled in its own land. The State of Israel is prepared to do its share in a common effort for the advancement of the entire people of the Middle East. We appeal to the Jewish people throughout the diaspora to rally round the Jews of Eretz Yisrael in the task of immigration and upbuilding, and to stand with them in the great struggle for the realization of the age-old dream, the redemption of Israel. These are the principles upon which our Jewish homeland was built. Freedom, justice, and peace, complete equality and political rights to all of its inhabitants, irrespective of religion, race, or sex. Freedom of religion, conscience, language, culture, equal citizenship and due representation to the Arabs, peace and good neighborliness, to establish a bond of cooperation and help. These are the principles that the protest movements are fighting for. These are the principles of my Judaism. This is the Israel that is my homeland. It is because of my unwavering love of Israel that I have joined the fight with my Israeli brethren and Jews around the world to protect our Jewish homeland. 3 well-known Israeli journalists, authors, speakers, and Israel advocates, Yossi Klein Halevi, Rabbi Daniel Gordis, and Maddie Friedman, wrote a joint article recently and gave a webinar telling the Jewish community in the diaspora that it's time to take a stand. And they wrote, "To our sisters and brothers in the diaspora, we are writing to you from Jerusalem in the weeks before the high holidays, during this time of introspection and self-reckoning, to urge you to join the extraordinary Israeli protest movement that is fighting to save the vision that created this country 75 years ago. This political crisis is not just one more Israeli debate over policy, but a struggle over the fundamental identity of Israel as a Jewish and democratic state. Vital institutions that require social solidarity, and most importantly the military, are splintering as Israel's most committed and productive citizens revolt against the leadership that is beyond moral repair, the pale. The tech economy that buoyed the startup nation is beginning to sink. State power is shifting from judges to extreme clerics. The voice of the fundamentalist religion is emboldened. A year ago, Israel was a powerhouse. Within a year, we could be on the road to becoming another failed Middle Eastern state. This unprecedented threat requires unprecedented changes in the diaspora's relationship to Israel. Diaspora support for Israel has traditionally taken the form of support for its government. But now the greatest threat facing Israel is its government. Jews in the diaspora can no longer support Israel without asking which Israel they're supporting. At this fraught moment, Jewish organizations conducting business as usual are placing themselves on the wrong side of history. With Israelis on the streets fighting for liberal values as they share with so many Jews around the world, this is no time for diaspora silence or alienation. To the contrary, when someone you love is in danger, you draw closer. After many years during which the divide between Israel and the diaspora has grown, this is a moment for diaspora Jews to find common ground with Israelis fighting for a country for which we can all be proud. Once again, these words stirred my soul, but I did not know what to do. My words are my power, otherwise I am powerless. Today, as we read the story of Sarah and Hagar, we can empathize with the powerlessness that Abraham must have felt when being told by God to listen to his wife, even when he felt her actions were wrong. We can empathize with Hagar, who chose to distance herself from her pain and to cry alone, feeling helpless and unheard. But her voice was heard, and she reclaimed her power. So today, I join my voice with the voices of Halevi, Gordis, and Friedman, and to those who stand each Sunday at 11 a.m. on the corner of Balaclava and Hawthorne Avenue, to the hundreds and thousands of Jews everywhere, and Jews in Israel who gather every Saturday night in cities throughout Israel to talk about the gravity of the situation in Israel right now. So before you fall asleep on me, why does this matter to us here in Australia? Well, according to Friedman, Israel is at a crossroads right now with three possible futures that will affect the entire Jewish world. One, the doom and gloom version, that, according to many, is a real possibility, is where the division between the government and the protest movement strengthens, leading to violence and possibly even a civil war. Israel destroys itself from within. Two, another doom and gloom version that has already commenced, where significant members of the military refuse to fight. Currently, only some of the military reservists are protesting and refusing to serve. This will leave Israel vulnerable to external enemies. Israel startups will accelerate their relocation outside of Israel, while the international community withdraws support for Israel, weakening the economy, increasing the cost of living, creating undue hardships on Israeli citizens, leading to a brain drain by industry leaders choosing to emigrate to the diaspora, all of which leads to a vulnerable Jewish homeland which may or may not be able to survive. And finally, a more hopeful outcome, whereby the government and the people reach a compromise, guaranteed to be disappointing to some. This compromise will buy time to build a bridge between these two competing Zionist visions, ideally leading to the creation of a constitution, and thereby reaffirming the legally binding, non-negotiable fundamentals underpinning the Jewish and democratic state. At his recent talk hosted by Zionist Council of Australia, Rabbi Hartman suggested that this crossroads actually opens a door to dialogue about the Israel we want now and moving forward. We are creating history right now. Zionism is being reworked as we sleep. Okay, some of you are falling asleep. I know this is a long sermon. It's really important. It's okay, you can sleep. But I want you to work with me for the end because it's important. Originally, Theodor Herzl, the father of political Zionism, wanted a national home, I quote, secured by public law for the Jewish people. Then he said, and I quote, "We will have a land upon which the Jew will be recognized as a human being wishing to work and live for freedom." Ahad Ha'am, the father of cultural Zionism, argued for, quote, a fixed spot to serve as a national spiritual center, a safe retreat not for Jews but for Judaism. Upon becoming prime minister, Menachem Begin, Bibi's role model, said, we do not wish to evict, nor shall we evict, any resident from this land, and they must live together in peace, mutual respect, equal rights, in freedom with socio-economic progress. So now we are left to ask, what is the Israel that we want in the 21st century and beyond? Just as the Israelis are the citizens of the state of Israel, the Jewish people, wherever we reside, remain the nation of Eretz Yisrael, the land of Israel. What happens in Israel reflects upon us all. What happens to Israel reflects Jews everywhere. And what we as a Jewish community do here in Australia affects Israel. Israeli author David Grossman told a crowd at a Tel Aviv rally, now is the moment to stand up and cry out. This is the land of our souls. What happens today will determine who we and our children will become. So I am here today, standing up and crying out and hoping you're listening. As Jews, we cannot be silent when we watch our beautiful, beloved Israel potentially being stripped of the values we hold dear. We cannot stand idly by watching Israeli society be torn apart. We cannot give up hope that our Jewish homeland can find a way through these current challenges. So what can we do? We can educate ourselves about the situation, why it matters not just for Israelis but for Jews around the world. We can pay attention to the Israeli website, Jewish Unpacked. They've got great stuff. Visit it. They said the biggest threat to Israel isn't about supporting or not supporting, being left or right. The biggest threat to Israel is indifference. We can join organizations like the Zionist Federation of Australia and urge Jews in Australia to write letters to the Israeli ambassador to Australia, our voice to the Israeli government, sharing the detrimental impact of the current direction of the Israeli government for Jews around the world. We can visit Israel and send our children to Israel, showing our support and solidarity with the people of Israel. We can join the weekly demonstrations at Caulfield Park in solidarity with Israelis living amongst us, showing them that this is not their problem, but our problem, an issue affecting the entire Jewish people. We can support the work of the Israeli Movement for Progressive Judaism, the Israel Religious Action Center, ARTSA, and the UIA Progressive Trust Appeal. Our progressive voice in Israel and organizations that support our Jewish and democratic values in Israel. We can add our voice to the World Union of Progressive Judaism, saying that the diaspora cares. Let us join together to fight for the Israel we are proud of, with its flaws and imperfections, with its accomplishments and contributions, with the governments we agree with and disagree with, but with a faith that the Jewish values and democratic principles upon which our Jewish homeland was built will continue to prevail. I want an Israel to proudly call our home. I'm speaking out today because I am a Jew, and Israel is the homeland of my soul. As Herzl said, Im tirtzu en zo agada, if you will it, it will not be a dream. I will it. Do you?